If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories about fitness and self-improvement which you can apply to your life today. So for those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I am your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience at attempting and completing the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge. So I'd done this last week. I'm recording this on the Thursday. So this time a week ago, I was nervous, I was worried, I was about to attempt it. But on June the 23rd, which was a Friday, I started the challenge and I completed it on Sunday the 25th. So I'm going to be sharing everything with you today about the challenge, my experience with it, and of course how I managed to complete it, what I learned from it, things you can possibly take from that, and potentially you could even try it. So we're going to go over everything like that today. So before I begin, I want to go over the challenge because a lot of you listening to this might not quite understand what it is. Maybe you've seen a bit on my Instagram. Maybe you've never heard about it before. So I'm going to explain that to you. So the 4x4x48 challenge is simply running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So you might be thinking, why would you do this? Now, it was made by a guy called David Goggins, who, if you don't know who he is, he's now an author. I've read both of his books, both incredible books. He's an ultra athlete, runs ultra marathons. Essentially, the guy is the most disciplined man on earth. That is what he's seen as, the epitome of discipline, of hard work, of the hustle, of the grind, whatever you want to call it. That is David Goggins. And I've been inspired by a lot of his content he's put out over the years. I've read both of his books, listened to both of his audiobooks, and I got an incredible amount of value from it. So I knew about this challenge, which of course is his challenge. It's his signature challenge where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And I thought, maybe I could do this, because for me, I'm someone that's always put discipline as a very high trait. I value it a lot. And I do see myself as a disciplined person, but I thought to myself, I had this little voice and it was saying like, are you actually disciplined? Why are you disciplined? Just because you get up early doesn't mean you're disciplined. Just because you do these workouts, that's habit for you. You're not disciplined. So I had this voice and I had to shut that up. I had to prove something to myself. So that is first and foremost why one of the main reasons I started the challenge was for discipline, to prove it to myself. And the second reason was, well, I've never personally raised money for charity. It's been something I've always wanted to do. And I thought, what better challenge to do? Because not many people have heard of it. People can get on board with it. And I can pick a charity that means a lot to me. So I didn't want to just pick one of the big charities, which of course do incredible work. But I wanted to pick a charity that I would physically see what's happening with the money that's donated. So I picked a charity called Kick Mental Health, which is an incredible charity. What they do is essentially they help those who are struggling with their mental health by providing a safe and supportive area for them to go and play football for free and support groups for free. So incredibly beneficial for those people that are using the service. And the founder, Ali, I've known him since I was younger, not seen him for years, but then I kind of went to one of the sessions, seen the amazing work those guys were doing, and it made me want to raise money for them. So I had 2 very strong reasons to do this. One, of course, to prove to myself, and the second was the discipline side of things. And then, of course, obviously the charity. Those would be the 2 things from there. So there's a quote that I think very well summarises why I value discipline so much in testing it. And it's by a guy called Seneca, who I've mentioned before. He was a philosopher over 2,000 years ago. And he said, the body should be treated more rigorously so that it may not be disobedient to the mind. And essentially what he's saying there is if you want to be a strong individual, you have to have a strong body so that it won't disobey your mind. So if you're telling yourself to do something, your body will do it. It will not fail on you. And this is why I test discipline all the time, physically and mentally, to do exactly that. So another thing I want to go over is a bit more about David Goggins, because people, you might be like, who is this guy? Like, why were you so inspired by this guy? And I want to read out a couple of his accomplishments to you. So first of all, I've seen this thing on TV, so he was very overweight. He weighed over 300 pounds, that's about 140 odd kilos. He was a bit of a loser. In fact, he was a total loser. Worked a job he didn't like, lived a life he didn't like, and he was inspired by Navy SEALs. He's seen an advert for Navy SEALs online and he thought, wow, I would love to do that. And for most people, that's where it would stop. But for him, he then picked up an obsession. And what he done was he became the most disciplined man, that as I see it, on the planet. So he had 3 months if he wanted to join the Navy SEAL. So he went to an office and they essentially said to him, listen, you're far too overweight. You need to lose over 100 pounds. And he was like, okay, well, how long do I have to do that? 3 months. And guess what? He'd done it. 106 pounds in 3 months is pretty much unheard of. Is it healthy? 100% no. But for him, he didn't desire anything more in this world than to be a Navy SEAL at that point. So he had to do that. So that's one of the things he'd done. Against all odds, he became a Navy SEAL. He went through what we call Hell Week, which is what they do in the Navy SEALs. He'd done that 3 times. So if you search up Hell Week, it is, as it sounds, it is hell on earth. He'd done that 3 times. He had the world record at one point for the most pull-ups, completing 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours. He completed a race called the Moab 240 in 62 hours. So that's running 240 miles. Like, you don't stop and rest for a week. You keep running. It's nuts. It's known as the world's toughest foot race. He completed the Badwater 135, which is a run through Death Valley, the hottest place on earth, 135 miles. You sleep for maybe a couple of hours in during that, and you complete that. He's done over 70 other ultra events, so 100-mile races. In fact, at one point, he'd done 8 100-mile races 8 weekends in a row. So imagine that. You run 100 miles on a Saturday. The next Saturday, you run 100 miles, and you do that for 8 weekends in a row. The guy is nuts. But the most crazy thing about it is not the physical feat, it's the mindset behind it. It's his attitude behind it. And as you start to watch his content, you will see that. And yeah, that inspired me so much to take on this challenge. So I'm going to explain a little bit now how the challenge went, what I faced, and yeah, absolutely everything about the challenge from here. So first of all, one of the reasons it was such a big challenge is because I'm not a runner. I never have been a runner. But the only run I'd done is, for example, I used to run 15 minutes every day during my high performance day, which I've spoke about here before. And that was it. That's all I ran. So 10 or 12 weeks before I attempted the challenge, it came into my head. I thought, do you know what? I think I'm going to try that. So I started running 4 miles every week. So that was my preparation for it. I ran 4 miles a week for about 12 weeks. On top of that, about 5 weeks ago maybe, I tried a half marathon. 13.1 miles. So I done that in a very flat area. I ran for 2 hours, 20 minutes. I completed it. It was terrible. I was terrible because I'm not a runner. But I completed it. So that was one I proved it to myself that I could potentially do this. Now, the reason I took 13 miles as a proving point was because, quite simply, there's a guy called Lex Friedman, a podcaster, and he trained for the challenge. And his top run was 13 miles. So I thought, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And that was essentially my training. Aside from that, I'm a young, fit guy. I knew the tough part was going to be the mindset and pushing through there onwards. So that was really how I trained for the challenge. There was nothing crazy behind it. One of the things I attribute to being able to do the challenge was for the fact for a whole year, in fact, a whole year to this date, I have been doing high performance days. So that's once per week. I've been up at 4 a.m. doing that 15-minute run, reading my daily readers and getting ahead of my day, getting more work done than any other day of the week. A year to the day I started that habit, and that has paid dividends, that's for sure. Getting uncomfortable, and that helped build that initial layer of discipline for me. Now, when it came to the challenge, I knew I had a decent chance physically. I knew, like, right, okay, you can probably do this physically. I mean, I've never ran anywhere near 48 miles, that's for sure, but as long as your knees hold up, as my joints hold up, my breathing should be fine. That was my thinking going into it. And I was technically right. Throughout the challenge, my legs were, as you would imagine, like bricks. They were so heavy, they were so sore. However, what I found was it was manageable. The first 3 runs weren't bad. I woke up at 4 a.m. on the Friday. I woke up at 20 to 4 on the Friday. My first run was at 4 a.m. After the first 3, it was midday. They weren't too bad. But that is when things started to get difficult, because I'd never ran more than 13 miles. I'd never ran more than that in a day, and already I'd ran 12. And yeah, I was starting to really, really feel it. So that was already when a couple of doubts started kind of creeping into my mind. I'm like, wow, you're nowhere near even halfway yet. You've got like 30 odd miles to go, more than 30 miles to go. How are you going to do this? So that was creeping into my mind. But physically, I was in a decent position. I wasn't in too much pain, just discomfort. So after that, I kept going, plodding away. And the really difficult point, the turning point, I feel, and that reached the utmost discomfort was about 8 p.m. That later that night. So I had an 8 p.m. run, I had a midnight run, a 4 a.m. run, and an 8 a.m. run. Those 4 runs were pretty bad. They were almost horrific, I would say, in the sense that was when I planned to sleep. I slept for 4 hours, just under 4 hours combined. So I got half an hour of sleep. It was like a 2.5 hour sleep and then another bit of sleep. So sleep deprivation was way more than I expected. I expected to get more sleep, but because if you go on my Instagram, you'll see the videos. I was editing 2 videos after every single run, which took me at least an hour. So looking back, maybe wasn't a good idea. But yeah, the sleep deprivation was a challenge. That not necessarily wanting to sleep, but its effect on my recovery and just how I felt alertness wise. That was the toughest part, because when I woke up on that morning, or after these 1 hour sleeps, sore stomachs were setting in. Like when I was running, I was getting really uncomfortable. Obviously, it was dark at midnight. My routes, I had to change a couple of routes. I started to pick up not niggles, but sorenesses. And yeah, that was the most challenging point, as you would imagine, when the sleep deprivation kicks in. And the worst part about it is you realise you're only halfway through. So not only have I never run this far in my life before, but I'm the most uncomfortable I've ever been physically. Mentally, I'm doubting myself. And that's where I was, and it was midnight, and it was in the pitch dark, and you're thinking, shit, people actually people are getting behind me here, which is one thing that helped me through, but it also adds to the doubt. It's like, you're going to let a lot of people down by not doing this. People are donating money. Imagine you don't complete this challenge. You can imagine the doubts that were going through my head. So that was one of the toughest parts about it from there. But on a more positive note, I have never experienced a greater runner's high or high at all from exercise than during this. After the 8 a.m. run, there was the 12 p.m. the next day when I knew I only had 12 hours left. Oh my God. After I finished those runs, the endorphin rush, I felt incredible. I was starving after every run, which was actually a good thing, because you looked forward. You're like, oh yes, I've got another 4 hours or 3 hours before I run. So I went home, I ate food, tried to recover, stretched off, edited the videos, done a little bit of reading, and I was back out again. Back out on the boats, carrying the logs, as Goggins would say. So yeah, there was good to the challenge. In fact, I actually, looking back on it now, I loved it. I felt so much joy knowing that I was growing and improving throughout it. And when I started to overcome, particularly after the runs, so of course the doubt would set up usually just before I went to run. But after these runs, I felt pretty inspired. I felt energized. And when I seen the messages from people coming through, which, by the way, if you were any of those people that messaged me, thank you so much, because they really, really did help. They helped push me forward from that. So, yeah, that was a great point from there. But when I got to the last day and into the last kind of 3 or 4 runs, there's something Goggins says. He says to himself, he says, it's time to go to war with yourself. And that's kind of what I was repeating to myself. I was like, right, this is why you're doing this challenge. You're doing this challenge to test how far you can push yourself, to see where your limits are. So that pushed me forward. I took a lot of positives from that, knowing that I was suffering. I was in that pain cave, as some would call it. I took positives from that. So that, of course, if you're going to attempt the challenge, you need to have this attitude where you can look at these moments of pain and discomfort as a time to thrive, as a time to grow. Because if you look on my Instagram page, I put videos up for every single run, and a lot of them are compilations of the runs, like little bits of it, and behind those are sounds, like music behind them, and a lot of them is people speaking on podcasts, motivational things, and for every single one, there is reasoning behind it. Like, there is reasoning behind that sound. The reason, like, some of them is like talking about this is where you need to dig deep, whatever. Those are the points where I was struggling most. But there was other runs where I was fired up. I was raring to go. So I got both sides of it. I got the discomfort, but then I also thrived in that discomfort, which is a very positive attribute that I've gained from this. But yeah, the last run was at midnight on the Sunday. So 12 runs in total, 4 miles each. As I said, it's 48 miles. So by that time, I'd run 44 miles. I just had to get it done. And to be honest, if I'd struggled that much, I would have walked it. I had 3 goals in the start. One was obviously to complete the challenge, was not to walk at all, was to run all of the 48 miles. The other was not to have any caffeine. So I didn't want to have any caffeine because I don't drink coffee. I don't usually have energy drinks or anything. It's very rare for me to have one of those. So that was another thing I wanted to prove to myself. Oh, and the other, I didn't listen to music. Because when I run, I don't usually listen to music. During my half marathon, I did listen to an audiobook, just because I was like, fuck, this is going to be long, so I may as well get some value from it. But aside from that, I don't listen to music. One, because I like the surroundings. I like listening to things like that. And two, it's discipline. I don't want to have to rely on something, which that may be a kind of thing that's at the back of my head that may be right or wrong, but that's how I felt. So there was no music, no caffeine, and zero walking. So I was really, really proud to get that done. But once I finished on the Sunday around 12:45, 12:50, I edited the 2 videos, I got to bed. I actually only slept for about 6.5, just under 7 hours from there, because I had client upgrades to do from online clients, and then I went about my day. I went to my girlfriend's, I had a nap, and yeah, I slept well that night, that's for sure. From there, so yeah, it was a pretty incredible challenge, and the feeling after it was, yeah, unbelievable. I was so incredibly proud of myself for doing what I said I was going to do, that, yeah, if you were going to undertake a challenge, that's how I would expect you to feel. Now, one of the things I wanted to go over was, in case any of you would ever want to try this, or any challenge of the sort, here is what I would kind of say to you, or why you should maybe try it. Now, if you want to test discipline yourself physically, mentally, this is a fantastic challenge, because the sleep deprivation, it is somewhat manageable because it's broken down into 4-mile runs. You're not running any more than 4 miles at one given time. And yeah, it's spread amongst over 2 days. So it's not like, right, it's one push and you get it over with. No, this is sustained discomfort. You need to push yourself throughout this. So it's a great opportunity to learn and grow from there. So I would recommend it from that. You can also, you don't have to run, you can cycle. You can walk it if you were really unfit, you could walk it. You could train at the gym if you were at a 24-hour gym. I think running is the best way to do it, but you could cycle. Especially if you find running difficult like I do. I don't really like running. It's even better for there. And then in the sense of training, of course, all I can say is I was able to do 13 miles before I started it. That was what I went off of. So if you could do that, you would likely be able to take on the challenge from there. And yeah, I would get used to running, get used to discomfort early mornings. And one way to do that would be by trying my high performance days. Wake up at 4 a.m, hours before you're usually meant to go to work, get out, run, get uncomfortable. And that would put you in a good position for the challenge, because of course that is what the whole challenge is about, this discomfort and fighting and pushing through that from there. So those are some tips that you could take in if you wanted to attempt the challenge from there. But now I've hopefully covered a lot about kind of how it was structured and everything and how I went through it. I want to go to a Q&A section, which I asked on my Instagram page. Everybody sent in some great questions, so I'm going to go through them, some in more detail, some I'll quickly move on from. But yeah, these are obviously, everything is off the cuff from here, nothing is written down beforehand, so we'll see what kind of questions and answers we get from here. So the first one is, how much rest did you need after it? And that's a very good question, because this is Thursday. I still don't feel 100% recovered, if I'm honest. I've actually felt a little bit wheezing in my chest today, which I can only assume was through running 48 miles a week ago. So yeah, my sleep could have definitely been better. Last night I had 8.5 hours sleep, which is the first time I've had that in probably weeks. It was well needed. I should have slept better on the Monday and Tuesday, but I was straight back to work on the Monday. So yeah, probably should have had more. And the question is, how much did you need after it? It would have been one good night, and then sustained consistently after that, back to the usual good sleep. But one thing that I like about that question is, how much do you need? Now, of course, that depends on what you want. For example, the very next day, I was back to work at 7 in the morning. I trained that day. Many people would think of that time like, oh, you've earned that over the weekend and stuff, which I'm big on, earning your rest. But it was a normal day for me. Although I was sore, I expected to be sorer. I was sorer during the run than I was on the Monday, so like essentially the day after I finished, which was a surprise. So I trained, and I trained well. I lowered my volume a little bit, but I was surprised. Now, most people would say, oh, well, you've done this, why don't you take a day off? The truth is I didn't need to. And that is what this question is about. How much rest did you need? Now, sleep, I definitely could have taken more of. It would have helped me with this potential, if it's a cough I've got coming on, whatever. But overall, I think I done what I needed to do. I was stretching after every run, got a good night's sleep in last night. So, yeah, that would have been it, purely down to sleep. But there was nothing crazy after that I needed, really. Question 2, this is a good one. Was there a point where you genuinely wanted to chuck it? What kept you going in that moment? Now, first of all, no. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to make up a story and say, oh, like, of course, there was times when I was in incredible discomfort. I was suffering, if you like. But there was not one point where I thought, I'm going to have to give up. Because there was too much mounting on it. There was my own expectations. There was expectations of others. It was for a charity, so I didn't want to let people down. The only thing that I felt would have made me give up, well, first of all, I would have walked it. If I was physically able to walk, I would have done the challenge. I would have got up out of my bed. I would have done it. There's nothing in my mind. So unless something had happened to me, I wouldn't have stopped it. The one thing I was worried about most was injury. Because my left knee, I have torn meniscus in my knee, right? Which is, the meniscus is essentially a shock absorber. Now, that didn't even affect me during the run, so I wouldn't use that as an excuse. It was fine. But I was thinking, oh, what if I fall, like if I take a wrong step, if I go over my knee? That was a worry, and that would be something where I would genuinely have to consider stopping. But I didn't, so I can't really comment on what kept you going in that moment. What I can say is all the support from others really, really did help. And the reasoning behind it, that's what pushed me forward. To prove to myself I am who I say I am, to raise money and impact others, that was what pushed me forward. So I hope that answers that. Question 3 is, would you do it again? And if so, what would you change? Good last part to that. I'm in no rush to do it again. Would I maybe do it again at some point in my life? Yes, probably. I don't really see the need to, but I potentially would do it just out again of another test. What would I change? More emphasis on stretching for sure. My foods would have been a little bit better. Because I was craving so many foods, I ended up going to just I was straight to the cereal, whereas I could have took 10 minutes to prepare a better meal. In saying that, I ate pretty decent throughout it. There was at one point where I was in an ice bath with a tub of Ben & Jerry's, which was one of my happiest moments throughout that, if I'm honest. It was just up to my kind of hips, so my legs were recovering. I was emotionally in a good position because I was eating that Ben & Jerry's. Yeah, so I burned 5,500 calories per day. It was 50,000 steps a day, essentially. So definitely probably would have planned my nutrition a little bit better, maybe stretched a little bit better. But other than that, I think I crushed it. I was regimented. I planned my warm-ups and everything. I went out bang on time. So I didn't you could go out any time within that 4 hours. Nah, I went out bang on 12 o'clock, bang on 4, and I mean to the minute, 4 p.m., 8 p.m., midnight. I went on bang on that minute. So I was happy with that. Now the next one, what was the feeling like after completing it? And it's a great question because it was pretty amazing. It wasn't a moment where I dropped down on my knees and I was looking up towards the sky, but it was like, holy shit, you proved to yourself that you can do this. Of course, everybody else was congratulating me and stuff, so it felt amazing. Those times throughout the run when I felt so motivated after the run, I got that endorphin rush, which I've never had before. In fact, there was one point where I was sitting in my car and I was laughing to myself about how good I felt. I was like, this is unbelievable. And that just, again, that reinforces exercise as a whole and training hard, what it can do for you. But yeah, I felt pretty incredible. And to this day, I feel really, really good about it. I feel inspired by it. I feel motivated by it. That I proved to myself that I am who I say I am and I do what I say I'm going to do. And I will continue to do that. So yeah, it felt amazing. Would you do anything different to prepare for the challenge? If you did it again, kind of off the back of the last question, yeah, it would have been the definitely the stretching, as I said, and everything like that. 3 more from here. What did you learn about yourself through the pain? What a question. Now, I have an answer to that, a scripted answer to that, which I can't remember. And the reason I have a scripted answer to that is because I made a video yesterday about it. And essentially, in fact, I remember it really, but essentially what it was is that you're capable of far more than you understand. I'd never fully tested my limits before. I'd done difficult things before, but never to that level. So this challenge really opened my eyes to what is physically possible, what is mentally possible, where can I push myself? So that is really what I learned through the pain, is that I'm capable of more, that when my body got to a set, like after the midnight run, 4 a.m. run of the first night and maybe the 8 a.m. run, I was in a lot of discomfort physically, but it didn't get so much worse. I thought it would. It got to a point where it was quite bad, but it never got like ridiculous. I thought it would keep going at that same rate, but it somewhat maintained and just got incrementally worse from there. So I was happy with that, and that's probably one of the things that I learned specifically through the pain. So that's a good question there. What inspired you to do it and keep going when it got tough? Again, just mentioned that the fact that I was doing this for my own word, to prove to myself, for the charity, for the people that were messaging me, that really did help. And the last one, can't stop there, what's next? And the truth is, nothing. I do not have a challenge planned. I do not need to prove anything to myself at the moment. In saying that, just because I've done this does not mean that I am disciplined and that I am going to be disciplined forever. I still need to continue proving to myself that I am who I say I am. But right now I have other focuses, particularly in business, that I'm going to focus on and pursue. So it's not my priority at the moment. I will definitely do another challenge at some point in my life. If it's in the next year, who knows? But I'm not rushing to do anything, that's for sure. I don't need to. I do not feel the need to prove that to myself at the moment. So no, nothing at the moment. 3 takeaways from the challenge that I'm going to share with you next. Because in fact, here's one of them that I just spoke about. And that was that you are capable more than you know. It is, as I said, incredibly tough to test where your peak is, where your limit is. And the closest you can get to that is by doing challenges like this. And the fact that I've realised that I can go this far means I can push more in other areas of my life. I'm capable of more, and so are you. It just takes a little bit of pushing to discover that. Now, the other thing I learned from the challenge is something I knew, but it just reinforced this, which I love, reinforcing things that I think I already know. Because I've said this loads. We don't truly understand something until we first experience it. And this is something I've experienced firsthand multiple times. And that is that discipline always comes before motivation. Motivation fades, it diminishes. I felt motivated after runs because the endorphins were high, everything was good, I was eating. But then in that midnight run, when I got out of my bed, the doubts crept down. All I needed then was discipline. Motivation was nowhere to be seen. I wasn't going to get that by watching a 30-second video with Goggins. Too late for that. And the discipline is what pushed me through. So it just reinforces in my mind how important discipline is in life. And the last one is that there is nothing more empowering than doing what you say you are going to do. That's something I've experienced so much in the past 6 months to a year. By going out and saying you're going to do something, and I don't mean ahead of time, like to myself, right, you're going to do this. This is what I'm going to commit my time to. Going out and doing that, it proves so much. Confidence goes through the roof. And yeah, that's one of the biggest lessons and the biggest takeaways from that. So I absolutely loved that part of the challenge. Now, to finish off, a couple of kind of things. Next week, I'll also be uploading another episode on the 12 lessons, my 12 most impactful lessons that I've learned in self-improvement throughout my whole pursuit of constant improvement. I actually mentioned all of these throughout the challenge, so if you've not seen them on my Instagram, you can head over. But I'm going to go into more detail with them on that next podcast episode, so be sure to kind of check in for that. If you're ambitious about testing your own discipline and you want to try this challenge and you have any more questions, drop me a DM. I'll be more than happy to meet up with you, have a wee chat, jump on the phone with you and go over a few things if you have more specific questions with that. But to finish the episode as ever, I have a quote for you, and this is a quote that did help keep me going. It was actually in one of the sounds of the videos that I posted. One of my close friends, John, sent this to me throughout. It's a clip that's done the rounds on social media of Chris Williamson on his podcast. I don't know where the quote's from, if he was reading it from someone else, but it is a quite incredible quote in times, if you're ambitious like me, that it really hits home. And the quote goes like this: "Whenever I get to a low point where I think, why do I even bother? I just remind myself that this is where most people stop and this is why they don't win. This is what hard feels like, and this is why most people can't do it. But you can." He sent that to me, I repeated that, and it's so incredibly true. When you get to challenging points in life, you realise why they're so difficult, why people quit, and you're then faced with a decision. You either quit along with them, or you keep pushing forward and you keep testing yourself and you see where you can go. And that's what I kept repeating to myself. When I got to that point, I was like, right, this is where most people would quit. In fact, you can go to my videos and you'll see, I think it was either the midnight run or the 4 a.m. run. It was probably the midnight. It was pitch dark. This is where most people would quit. They would get up and they go, nope, not for me. I'm away back to my bed. But that isn't me. That isn't the guy I want to be. That is not me. So that quote helped kind of relight that in me. And I hope that does something for you too. Now, as ever, thank you so much for listening to this episode, for investing some of your time in listening to this. I hope you've gained some value from it, from any of the points I mentioned, from learning from my experience. If you want to, for whatever reason, give back to me, I will leave the link below to my donation link to Kick Mental Health. Every single bit of money goes to Kick Mental Health. We've raised a great amount of money so far. But if you were inspired somewhat by my efforts, or you found it commendable and you would like to donate, the link will be in the description below, and I would greatly appreciate that. It impacts more lives than you know. So without that, everything covered. Thank you so much for listening. As I said, I hope you take something from this episode and apply it in your own pursuit of constant improvement.